The MCU is back with another banger. Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and the MCU just released its brand new limited edition series, Marvel Zombies. The newest series to come from Marvel Animation, the company that's made many of the other animated shows, X-Men 97, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, all of those are these guys. And this show is a very interesting new one that they made, as Marvel Zombies is a show that's continuing off of the What If episode from season 1 that was about the What If Zombies, and it's also trying to be a little bit more of a closer adaptation of the original Marvel Zombies comic run. And this show was definitely one that I had a lot of concerns for going in, as well, for one, I was a little excited for it, as it was continuing off of one of the better episodes of What If. I'm happy Marvel Zombies got a whole spinoff series instead of a couple other episodes that I just don't genuinely care about. And I also had many concerns, like many others, as this series was less about adapting the Marvel Zombies comics and was also a little bit more about being its own thing. There are pros and cons to all of this, to making a show, and I'm actually happy to report I was pretty surprised by Marvel Zombies. And Marvel Zombies, I think, is proof that the MCU can actually produce high quality Disney Plus shows that are worth your subscription time. So I'm going to go through my spoiler review of Marvel Zombies, and I'm going to tell you why it's one of the genuine shocks and actually makes me happy that knowing that the MCU can actually produce shows that are worth my time and subscription to Disney Plus. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about in this review is the story of the show, as the story is very short. This show is only 4 episodes, each being about 30 minutes, which means that the show goes by very quickly if you're watching it all in one go. And this is definitely one of those MCU shows I think could have benefited from the weekly release schedule instead of being all dropped on one day, but that's a story, that's a whole question for another day. The story for this Marvel Zombie show is it's continuing from the aftermath of the original What If episode of what if the zombies took over the world. And basically the whole premise of the show is that we have a group of surviving characters that are surviving from a zombie Wanda who becomes the Queen of the Dead, which I think is a really fun way to do that character, and especially after she kind of had limited screen time in the What If episode. And that was really fun, and I really loved how they structured the episodes where a lot is happening, but also there's enough being set up for you to want to keep watching. There was never a moment in this season where I was like bored or wondering why something mattered until it later came up, because it was pretty rare that something would get set up and then be paid off pretty shortly after in the exact same episode. Each episode ends with a cliffhanger that makes you want to keep watching the next episode, much like some of the better Disney Plus shows. And in reality, the ending of the season is a cliffhanger, which I did not expect, which was shocking that they went that route, especially because I didn't know they even greenlit a season 2, so crazy. And it was really fun, and just also pairing into some of the things that make the story great as well, that the animation in the show looks amazing. Marvel did a great job with the look and feel of this show, especially how it's meant to be parodying the live action MCU, so it actually looks really nice because they actually made a ton of the characters literally look like their live action counterparts, plus they actually got the voice actors back to do them, but that's for the next segment, so I'm gonna hold off my thoughts on that. The animation looks amazing, the action looks really stunning, almost like some of the things I praised about Eyes of Wakanda when I reviewed that. And something else that I think was a really good call for this show was they actually got a TVMA rating, which I felt was a great idea because that means they could actually fully lean into the gore and the action that you expect from like top tier zombie projects such as The Last of Us or Walking Dead and stuff like that, which was really cool to see. There's so many great action sequences in this that I could praise, like the Blade Knight versus Ghost fight, the scene where Spider-Man literally just rips the heads off of zombies, even just everything with zombie Thanos. Like, this show leaned into that gory action that you expect from a zombie apocalypse movie, and I loved it for that. I mean, I was sitting there on the edge of my seat during some of those scenes. Like, those were some of my favorite scenes in the whole show. And the story overall, it does have a little bit of issues that I'm not the biggest fans of. You do have to take some leaps in logic to understand what's going on. Like, you have to accept that somebody on planet Earth has made a transmitter that could contact the Nova Corps, and then they shrunk it and put it in a guy's chest so that it could land in New York so someone else could find it. And then you also have to accept that the Nova Corps are quarantining Earth. You have to accept a bunch of kind of things. Like, you have to accept some things like, why is this character on Earth and why did they get zombified? So you have to take some leaps in logic to understand some parts of the story. But honestly, when I was watching this on my first go through, and even on my second go through when I was taking a lot more notes, I didn't really have too many issues with some of those inconsistencies. Like, I can accept things like Carol Danvers was on Earth and she got zombified. I can accept that the Nova Corps quarantined Earth. I can accept that. It's not like it's dumb plot holes from some of the other bad MCU projects like Secret Invasion and She-Hulk, where you have to take so many leaps in logics to even understand what's happening. In this show, there's leaps in logic, but, at least they're leaps in logic I can honestly get behind instead of sitting there and being like, wait, why is that the decision you made? So yeah, the story in this show has some issues here and there. Mainly also consists of it being really short. Like, I wish that this was either a longer season or it was even a movie, which I understand they couldn't have made it a movie because of Spider-Man being in it, but other than that, this was pretty solid on the story level. I think the story was honestly a lot more surprising and better than I thought it was going to be. So you know what? I'll take what I can get when it comes to a show like this. But now that I've gotten my story complaints out of the way, I'm going to lean a little bit more into talking about the characters. And I already know, because it just has already happened, that most of the people's complaints are going to be that the characters we're following in this series are mostly the Phase 4 and Phase 5 multiverse saga characters, which, honestly, I don't know why people are so frustrated about that, because, first off, the original What If episode focused on the Infinity Saga characters, as we saw zombified versions of the Avengers and all of those adjacent characters, and then the Survivor group that we followed in that episode was like the characters that would have been around during Infinity War times, because that's when the episode takes place. So honestly, making it be about Phase 4 and Phase 5 characters was really the only route they could have taken, because like they already used all the Infinity Saga characters in the previous episode, so they had to use the new ones. So I don't know why people are frustrated about that. That's like literally the only choice they had, so whatever. But honestly, at least they picked the good Phase 4 and Phase 5 characters to follow, as it was really fun that they actually centered this series on Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel. And honestly, I just love Iman Vellani and everything she's in. She's an amazing casting choice for Miss Marvel, and I really hope that Marvel starts to give her more projects, because she deserves more projects. Like, she was great. We got to follow some of the high characters that we know, like Red Guardian, who still is comic relief self from the Thunderbolts, which I loved. You got Elena in there. We got to see Shang-Chi. And surprisingly, I didn't actually hate Awkwafina as Katie in this. Like, I have admitted that she is one of my least favorite parts of Shang-Chi's movie, but this show actually uses her pretty sparingly to where she doesn't become annoying. And the fact that she actually gets to use the 10 rings in this show, that was such a cool idea that honestly, I hope they do in live action, because I think that would be an amazing idea. And they just did. Also, I gotta talk about my favorite character in this season. Blade Knight was honestly a treat. It sucks that we still have not got Mahershala Ali's Blade movie, because after seeing how they handled Blade in this show, oh my, I need to see that movie immediately, because it shows that they know how to handle the Blade character, and having him be a Moon Knight, that was just great. There's so many scenes in this show where he literally is just aura farming, and he's just one of the coolest characters I've ever seen in a Disney Plus show. Like, he honestly won the price of admission for me. And plus, even though these characters are a little underutilized, I still love Scott Lang and also Spider-Man carrying over from that original What If episode. And I do like that they also did some things with other characters. Like, I love that they actually didn't have T'Challa They didn't actually recast T'Challa because he would have carried over. I like they gave him like a whole heroic sacrifice and kind of gave him this really emotional death sequence after fighting zombie Thanos. I thought that was a really nice way to pay tribute to Chadwick Boseman because he would have voiced this character in the What If episode. So it's honestly just nice that they did that for him. I think that was a really nice and sentimental way to do that. It was just nice. And I just loved other things. Like, honestly, Wanda Maximoff's Red Queen, the Queen of the Dead, she was such a good villain to follow. I'm so happy that they got Elizabeth Olsen back to voice her, because honestly, she just delivered such a performance where you feel the creepiness in her, like you feel during WandaVision, that you feel during Multiverse of Madness. You feel that in this show, and it was so refreshing to see a really nice villain. And the fact that she even wins in the end was something I wasn't expecting. That was really cool. And honestly, there was just a lot of great moments when it came to the characters. One thing I do have a little bit of a little critique with is I think they killed off characters a little too often just as a means of raising the stakes, which I get you do that in a zombie apocalypse show, like, but it just feels like every single episode in this season ended with some character in our main group dying, and then that's some emotional turmoil we have to carry over to the next episode, which I didn't think was the best way to do that kind of thing, but it could have been worse, so I'll take it. And the other thing I think is that there were certain characters in the season that they didn't use enough and just used as kind of glorified cameos. Like, you give an Icarus cameo so that everyone remembers Eternals exists. You get a Captain Marvel cameo. You get, even though they're kind of part of the first episode, I kind of wanted more out of Ironheart and Kate Bishop. They were honestly kind of surprising, and it was nice to see kind of like a mini Young Avengers, but, it could have been, I could have been a little better. They kind of underutilized some of the different zombie villains, and which was like, hey, look who we got zombified. It's zombified Namor. It's zombified Abomination. It's zombified Ghost. And they're only around for like 1 second fights against the main characters. So, it's fine though. At least I did enjoy the fight sequences like I mentioned in the story segment. So, I'll take what I can get. But overall, I was really impressed with how they handled probably about 90% of the characters in this show. It was a really refreshing form. And honestly, like I mentioned, they got pretty much everybody back to voice their characters. I don't think there's a single stand-in they have in this whole show except for Spider-Man. I think he's the only stand-in we have about the entire cast, which I think is just a really strong, which is really good because it shows that Marvel cares about these characters, and it does really feel like you're just watching a live-action MCU movie, but it's just animated because of just they used all the same voice actors, which I think is just great. So, you know what? Characters were probably the highlight of this whole show for me. I loved pretty much all of them, and it made for such a great viewing experience because, hey, it's about characters I love, and a story I think is pretty solid. So you know what? I'll take that over a show that I absolutely hate, like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion. But the last segment I kind of want to go into with my thoughts on Marvel Zombies is that the show is just enjoyable. Like, I've constantly brought it up in many, many videos I've made across the channel, but in my opinion, every single movie doesn't need to be the next greatest movie that's ever been created. It doesn't need to be the best thing you've ever seen in your entire life. It doesn't need to be amazing. In my opinion, if a movie or show that I decide to watch is enjoyable and I have a good time watching it, then it did its job. Like, I sit down to go to the movie theater or watch Disney Plus because I want to escape reality for a couple hours or just sit down and let my mind relieve some steam for a little bit. And if a movie or show does that, then it did its job for me. That's why I've said on this channel that I don't like things like She-Hulk, a show that felt like a chore to get through because it felt like one of those instances where I'm giving up my time where I'm trying to escape reality just to be irritated by something for the whole runtime. So Marvel Zombies was a really enjoyable show. I didn't want to stop watching it every time when I turned it on. I didn't want to stop watching, and honestly, it's one of the few Marvel MCU shows that where when I reached the end of the final episode, where I actually went and said, wait, that's it? When's season 2? I think the only other shows I've done that for is Daredevil Born Again and Loki. So that should tell you that I think pretty highly of the show, that I want another season. And honestly, if the show is enjoyable, then it did its job. It didn't need to be the next Avengers Infinity War. It didn't need to be the next Back to the Future, Inception. It didn't need to be the next of those movies. It just needed to be enjoyable to a point where I could spend 2 hours watching Marvel Zombies, and it's a fun escape from reality. And that's honestly great. And more power to you if you have a different way of judging movies, but that's the way I usually judge movies, especially for the ranking videos. So, having a show that I really genuinely enjoyed and that I would have loved to see more of should tell you that I think this show was a lot of fun and it deserves to be praised, because I just really, really enjoyed it, and I would happily sit through it again more than probably like 75% of the MCU. So that should tell you a lot about how I feel about this show. So, to put it as an overall, I thought Marvel Zombies was a really genuine surprise that I really enjoyed. In fact, I'm actually being fully truthful here. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed Marvel Zombies. There's a few issues I mentioned here and there throughout the review that kind of keep me from giving it a perfect 10 out of 10 score, but if you actually want to know my overall ranking, which I actually looked at it before I made this video, putting this show at a 9 out of 10 literally puts it right up in my top 5 favorite MCU shows, right alongside Loki, Daredevil, Punisher, and Daredevil Born Again. So that should tell you that I really genuinely enjoyed the show, because it's up there with some of the best TV shows that Marvel's ever had their hand in producing. So I just really enjoyed Marvel Zombies, and in fact, it put a lot of faith back into me for the MCU, because like, if you've noticed my reviews recently, ever since Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, The Eyes of Wakanda, and now Marvel Zombies, every single one of them I've thought really highly of. And that makes me really excited, because keep in mind, these are all projects that were done post the Marvel creative overhaul. All of these were done after the MCU took a step back and said, we're going to start prioritizing quality over quantity. And it really does show that. We're not having a new MCU thing released every other week now, but at the same time, we're getting projects that are way higher of quality. I mean, many of you might have noticed throughout the reviews and some of the ranking videos, some of the MCU stuff that's been released recently is some of my favorite MCU stuff, not only from the last couple of years, but in general, which I think is just means that Marvel really is doing things right. And if this show is anything to go off of, it's proof that the MCU can make good Disney Plus shows when they're given the creative freedom and the creative control that they had back in the early phase of the MCU. In fact, this show made me even more excited for shows later this year like Wonder Man, for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, for Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 2, X-Men 97 Season 2. It just makes me so excited that they're actually prioritizing the quality like they said they were going to, and this show is the proof of that. And honestly, I love Marvel Zombies even more for that. So, I want to thank you guys all very much for watching this review, and let me know in the comments, what did you think of Marvel Zombies if you've seen it? Leave your comments down below and maybe we can get a conversation going. Without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video. I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!